UFC 263 was an event where I feel like Nate Diaz dominated the headlines. Surprisingly, Nick Diaz managed to take a couple of headlines too. Both these guys now look set to fight again this year. So I asked the question, what is next for the Diaz brothers? Before I do, my name's Rahul J-Chan. This is the Battle Camp. Thank you very much for joining me. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So yeah, as I started this video saying, Nate Diaz, in my opinion, dominated the headlines going into the fight with his antics in the press conference, just his presence on Embedded, some of the things that he said in interviews with people like Kevin Iole, which is something that you don't see on a regular basis. And then obviously coming out of the fight itself, even though he lost, he came out with some credit because of that last minute in the 5th round. Nate Diaz managed to keep his star firmly intact, and with that aside, I kind of feel like his presence just showed that he's a star amongst very high level popular fighters, because that card was stacked. It had 2 title fights and it had people like Israel Adesanya on there, Marvin Vettori, who was trying to become the first ever Italian UFC champion, which I probably heard that sentence 3,432 times during fight week. So, you know, there was a lot of momentum going into the event, and there was a lot of big names on the card, but I feel like Nate Diaz is the guy that managed to keep establishing himself as the biggest star, because he kept taking away all of the headlines. Nick Diaz as well, again, like I said, when Dana White was asked during his media engagements about Nick Diaz, this is the first time Dana White has been positive about Nick Diaz fighting again in the UFC in literally years. And Dana White said it looks like Nick Diaz will be making a return to the octagon at some point this year. And then obviously during the fight week, he joined the entourage and supported Nate Diaz. We had the Nick Diaz army back intact in full force. He was there helping Nate Diaz prepare for the fight on fight day, warming up with him. And then we even saw Nick Diaz at the post-fight press conference where Nate Diaz sparked up a big fat spliff and passed it to his older brother like a good little boy. So yeah, what's next for both of these guys? So it's very difficult to talk about both of them as one entity, because obviously they're both their own men, they're both individual fighters. So let's look at Nick Diaz first. Personally, I would not want to see him fight at middleweight, right? Because we know his last fight was at middleweight, but that was back in 2015, and that was almost like a super fight at the time, because it was an opportunity for him to fight Anderson Silva. Now, I know that wasn't when Anderson Silva was a champion, and I know Nick Diaz was coming off of 2 defeats, GSP and prior to that Carlos Condit, but they were still big, massive names in the sport, right? But Nick Diaz's fighting style, Nick Diaz's frame, he's not a guy that has a lot of physical strength and relies on that to impose himself on his opponent. In this day and age, coming off he hasn't fought since 2015, so a 6-year layoff. I wouldn't want to see him come back at middleweight. I don't think that would be a wise decision on Nick Diaz's part or the UFC's part. I feel like it's so difficult to match up Nick Diaz, because he's a guy that is a star, same as his younger brother. People might have forgotten, y'all might have forgot, but Nick Diaz was a tremendously huge star when he was an active fighter. Even before he joined the UFC, like I personally feel, and it might just be because I'm a fanboy, but while he was at Strikeforce, I would have even then put him as a top 5, top 10 star in the sport, right? And he wasn't even fighting for the primary organization. He didn't have that big machine behind him, but he's a guy that everybody who followed the sport was aware of. And he's a guy that everyone was clamoring to have join the UFC roster, because all we wanted to see was Nick Diaz against GSP back then. So with all that being said, he's a guy that has the star, who has the drawing power of a main event fighter. But like I say, he's been inactive for 6 years, so we don't know what we're going to get. So we need to match him with a bit of with a bit of trepidation. Need to be a bit careful. Like people I hear talking about Jorge Masvidal, and names like that, and I'm thinking to myself, hold your horses just for a minute. Like, we don't know if he still got it, right? We don't know whether he is the same fighter that was operating back in 2015. When I made a video about Nick Diaz previously, I did say I'd love to see him fight someone like Donald Cerrone. And I think that would be a good fight for Donald Cerrone at this stage in his career. And I think that would be a good barometer, a good measuring stick for Nick Diaz to see, is he still the same Nick Diaz, or has that phase of his life passed him by? Has he lost some of what he once had? So it's difficult to list out names at this stage, but for me, Carlos Condit keeps jumping out. Even though Carlos Condit's been more active, I feel like Carlos Condit has shown that he is a guy that isn't operating at the level that he once was. He's not at the peak of his powers. There's history there. And that fight would make sense. And to me personally, I would be happy for that to be a co-main event of a numbered event. Do you know what I mean? Seeing Nick Diaz back against Carlos Condit, history there, these two guys facing off again for a second time, because the first time they fought, it was a close fight. Who remembers? Was it rounds 1, 2, and 5? No, Nick Diaz won rounds 1, 2, and 5. I think I was one of those people that kept saying that over and over again, and I don't even know if it was those 3 rounds, but I just have in my head 1, 2, and 5. That's what I would like to see him do. Carlos Condit or Donald Cerrone. I would have said Matt Brown, but then after seeing what he done over the weekend, I don't know whether that's a wise move, because Matt Brown seems to be close to where he once was, you know, and I feel like, I don't want to say, like, what I don't want to see is Nick Diaz come back against someone that was fighting at the same time that Nick Diaz was once fighting. And when Nick Diaz was at his peak, a guy that Nick Diaz, I feel like, would have beaten quite comprehensively, and then he comes back and fights someone like a Matt Brown and gets exposed just because he's just not as good as what he once was. So I feel like we need to be careful, and we need to find an opponent that fits the criteria of someone that can headline or be up there on a card with Nick Diaz, but also not be someone that is clearly a top welterweight who's at his or close to his peak. Now, Nate Diaz is a funny one for me, because look, he said he wants to fight in the next 3 months or so, right, in the post-fight press conference, and he's pretty set on wanting to fight at welterweight. Now, it's difficult now to sit here and say who should he fight next. The name that keeps jumping out at me is Jorge Masvidal, because Jorge Masvidal seems like he wants to fight again later this year, October, November time or something like that. That'll probably fit into Nate Diaz's requirements. Sorry, I keep burping. And also, it's a fight that Nate Diaz wanted to run back because of how the first fight ended. Now, it's pretty fair to say Jorge Masvidal was dominating that fight with Nate Diaz. But there is that little glimmer of what if? What if the ref didn't stop? What if the doctor didn't stop that fight on cuts? What would have happened? Because we saw what happened when Nate Diaz managed to get the last minute of the 5th round with Leon Edwards, and he had him in trouble. Could he have done that with Jorge Masvidal? You know? So there is a question there. But I think one of the things that I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about, and it might just be because it's a figment of my imagination, is the fact that Nate Diaz took this fight with Leon Edwards. And I was surprised that he took this fight with Leon Edwards, just because Leon Edwards didn't scream to me to be the type of fighter that Nate Diaz would have been interested in. That he took the fight. And Nate Diaz is talking about wanting to be active and wanting to fight in the next 3 or 4 months. And I don't know how many fights that Nate Diaz has left on his contract, but for some reason in my head, I feel like he's got 3 fights left. And I don't know if I heard someone say that or where I've got this information from. I feel like I might have heard Ariel Helwani say it or something like that. Is there a possibility that all Nate Diaz is trying to do is fight out his contract? Fight out his contract, not really too concerned about individual paydays and trying to get the most money out of the next fight and agreeing to sign an extension to the deal that he has because he just wants the biggest payday in his next payday? Is he looking at the landscape of combat sports in general right now, looking at all of these fights that are happening on Triller, these fights with the Paul brothers, you know, Jake Paul's been calling Nate Diaz out on a regular basis. Is he looking around and thinking to himself, hold on a minute, I'm a star up in this bitch, and if I walk away from the UFC, I could probably write down whatever number I want on a piece of paper and someone will be willing to pay me to fight someone for that number. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like that might be the game plan for Nate Diaz. I feel like he's here now willing to explore just exactly what his market value is and not have that value dictated to him by the UFC. It's quite funny because actually he's been quite vocal about this, and I wanted to make a separate video about this topic, about MMA fighters coming out and talking about how why is Jake Paul making so much money and why do we not get why do we not make as much money? It's because nobody's a strong word, but not as many people are willing to pay to see you, which is why you're not making as much money. Nate Diaz is a guy where people are willing to pay to see him. So it would make sense for him to explore that market to see exactly what his worth is, to see exactly what people are willing to pay him to box a Jake Paul, to, I don't know, box a Oscar De La Hoya. Do you know what I mean? There's all this crazy stuff that's going on at the moment. There's other organizations out there that I'm pretty sure would be willing to pay Nate Diaz for a fight in their organization. I mean, he could probably command a big, massive payday from Bellator for a one-off fight. It wouldn't even have to be a 3-fight deal or whatever. It would be, all right, yeah, I'll come and fight Douglas Lima. Just give me X amount. Similar to how boxing works even. I feel like there's scope for this for Nate Diaz, and I don't know, man. I might be completely wrong. He might have 6 fights left on his deal. I might be talking complete and utter nonsense because obviously I don't know how many fights he has left on his deal. But if he's only got 2 or 3 fights left, he could bang those out against whoever. He could just have those fights, and even if he loses, the same way he lost against Leonard, let's not forget he got dominated in that fight. That last minute is where he managed to grab some of that kind of I don't know what the right word is, but grab some of that back with that shot. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like he could go out and he could lose 2 guys and he would still maintain that same level of star power, and you could go out to the marketplace and say, right, what are you willing to pay me to box? Do you want me to box? I can box. But I'd be really interested to see how all of this pans out. Let me know what you guys think. Put your comments below. Don't be scared to hit the like button if you've enjoyed this. Share this with a friend. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch you guys next time.